Good afternoon. It's really my pleasure to have this virtual coffee with all of you on the topic of monitoring and impact assessment of research infrastructures, a topic I think that has become more and more prominent in recent years in a broader policy discourse, and as well as I believe in your daily realities as you face more requests for monitoring and requirements to account for these broader societal impacts that your facilities generate beyond the core mission of fostering scientific excellence. I think everybody involved in this topic acknowledges that it's quite a complex topic because socioeconomic impact, this broader impact, is essentially about understanding and tracing interactions. It's about process-oriented. So in order not to get overwhelmed, and we all need more shared language and more shared understanding to exchange what do we actually mean by impact, how do we go about to scope it, it's essentially how we go about to communicate about it. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I will introduce what has been achieved in the Horizon 2020 project RI Path, which was a coordination and support action specifically dedicated to this topic. But more importantly, I think we will have a discussion of what needs to be done further in order to really help research infrastructures to undertake meaningful impact assessment activities that generate value for the staff of research infrastructures, for stakeholders, and also for policymakers, so that it's not just a dry requirement, but rather really a value in it. So dive right into it. So RI Path was a project initiated by the Commission back in 2011. And the aim was to develop a comprehensive framework how to understand and scope socioeconomic impact of research infrastructures. And that was across all types of research infrastructures. The ambition was very conceptual because policymakers realized they don't know enough what they can be requested or what needs to be talked about when we talk about socioeconomic impact. But the outputs are, we designed the project in a way that the outputs would be as practical as possible. So that's really a help to research infrastructures in this matter. And so all in all, the mission of the project was to give policymakers, funders, and research infrastructure managers tools to assess impact on the economy and contribution to society. And we did not go straight into indicators or assessment methods because there is really a wide variety of approaches how to measure specific impacts. But we did take a step back. We realized that there is simply not yet a full understanding of what are the long-term impact pathways, or so-called those logical chains, how exactly research infrastructures create effect in society and economy. And the project itself, we started thinking about this topic in a very interactive manner because we realized research infrastructure people are the people who know more about it. We just need to gather them across, basically around one table and share this understanding and share this knowledge in order to create a more comprehensive framework, or as I call it, a very rudimentary map of how we should understand it. And I think the basic principle of the project was that we need to better understand so-called impact pathways. Those who are not familiar maybe with the term, logic is simple, but it's not simplistic. So it's basically, we need to understand the causal chains of how resources invested and activities carried out in research infrastructures lead to certain direct results or so-called outputs. And these are things that are directly under the control of research infrastructure management because we generally trace what we do and then we account for in terms of key performance indicators and various indicators, we kind of account what happened. But interest really lies in sort of what happens afterwards with these direct results. So how they lead to shorter term or longer term outcomes. This is under the sphere of influence of the research infrastructure, but it's not directly under control what happens after that. But the interest, the policymaker interest, lies even further down the line. So what happens when those outcomes, so longer term outcomes, really diffuse in society through all those interactions, and they're interested into impact, but it's actually outside of the control or influence of research infrastructure management. But this is the key challenge here. So I saw from the list of participants that a couple of you are from communication sector. So just to make one example of what it means, an impact pathway would be if we invest money, skills, and dedicated staff and to carry out certain public relations and communication activities. Outputs in our terms would be, we would count how many people are participated in events and how many people we reach with our communication. Then longer term outcomes would be actually better public understanding of science and what the research infrastructure does. So that's even further down the line. But impact is even more so. We would say impact is, increased trust in science because there is more communication. It's not just this research infrastructure that contributes it, but this is where the policymakers are somehow having the requests to account for. But obviously, this is not impact pathways are not linear. It's more in reality they're more intertwined causes, basically networks of causes and effects. So we, through the project, realized that better to portray them actually as a tree, where resources and activities are sort of roots. You have a trunk of outputs that directly, come from the resources, and then we branch out various longer-term outcomes as branches. And impacts are really leaves. They are across the board. There are blossoms and leaves across there. But in terms of strategy and the important level for impact strategy and measurement is actually the branches, because this is where you still, as a research infrastructure management team, can have a control and influencing. So maybe that's in terms of theoretical way to account what was the main idea. But just diving into what we achieved, I think the key contribution from the project, from the RI-Path project, is that through various interactive workshops with a wide range of research infrastructures, I think in total there were nine such workshops and lots of interactions. We identified commonly 13 generic impact pathways, so sort of 13 logical chains. What we see how really impacts diffuse in society and economy. They're high level, meaning that they were very simplistic or simplified, but I think it's also a very important achievement in terms of really populating the map of understanding. And these pathways were grouped along 3 high-level missions. So enabling science, problem solution, and then a bit more the science and society interaction, which is a bit more messier in terms of understanding. I will not go into what are the pathways, because that's a lot, as you see, 13 very, very distinct causal chains and descriptions of them. What I want to draw your attention to is that all these outcomes of the project were gathered together in an online toolkit. And the toolkit was meant for a specific reason to help everybody involved in the topic, first of all, to understand the topic better, to explore this information we have, the outcomes and the knowledge we have generated through the project. So it includes all the impact pathway descriptions. It also includes indicators useful to trace these impact pathways in specific impact areas. There's also a lot of knowledge and examples on good ways to collect data, and as well as good ways for applying assessment methodologies. So all in all, it's sort of an orientation tool, an interactive one. So people with various levels of knowledge in the topic can dive into exactly the area that he, she, or is interested in. But it's also a resource, kind of a one-way entry point into the topic. The toolkit itself also has an accompanying guidebook. It's a PDF document that is a narration of the logic of the tool and the knowledge generated on the topic itself. I really I note down here the link, and I encourage you to explore it, because I think it's the easiest way to get into the topic with various levels of knowledge. But all in all, while the project, I think what the project has achieved in terms of knowledge generation, I think we started off a mapping process of what are the key lines of key really impact areas important to look at, and started to pull together really real life examples and real life applications. But I think it's still a very, very unpopulated map. There is still a long way to go in order to better understand details of that. And while the aim, I think, was achieved in terms of that it is more practical, it is a guidance tool into the topic, I think we are still not in a position that we would have a recipe for research infrastructures, how exactly to develop you know, the research impact assessment approaches. So I think today I wanted to outline 3 steps that seem to be in the next steps to take in order to proliferate this knowledge and actually meaningful impact assessment exercises. And I will go through these first initial steps, and I really encourage you to react with your experiences in the impact assessment with these questions that I pose, and maybe we can come up with interesting solutions or actually products that policymakers should still develop in order to help research infrastructures in this area. So one of the first things I think throughout many interactions with research infrastructures in these interactive workshops was that before any impact assessment activity or any monitoring exercise or any really time-consuming effort around this topic, one needs to achieve an internal understanding across various types of staff, research infrastructure, and have a management support for impact assessment activities. Because it is clear that if before impact assessment was perceived as something that is imposed on you, then actually carrying it out and realizing the value of it, infrastructures realize that it's actually a good strategic management tool, because we are better aware where our interactions with wider stakeholders are. It's also, if we understand it, it's a great communication tool, because we can now phrase better what is the value of research infrastructure also beyond science, which is add-on for the communication. So one of my questions is, what can be done in terms of activities or perhaps specific engagement to achieve this awareness raising? That would be the first step. The second step, while our RIPath guidebook sets out a nice framework or nice guidelines how to think about impact assessment, it's very clear that each research infrastructure needs to have a very tailored understanding of what are the key impacts that are really relevant for my case, how exactly those impact pathways look in my case. And we came to understanding that this knowledge or this sort of conceptual framework can be developed only by people who are on research infrastructure. One needs to gather them around one table and actually get that knowledge together, co-create. And my question to you, do you think if there is a need for assistance in setting up such structured co-design exercises, because we had an experience with the European Southern Observatory, where we also developed for them an impact assessment framework. We did interview all types of staff, from scientific to communication team to management team to international relations team, and they were amazed to learn how much of these interactions in other spheres they did not know, and how pleased they were to see what they commonly perceive as their impact, their broader impact beyond science. So I think there's a lot of things still to develop in terms of assistance. So, and third thing, we're thinking and there are many research infrastructures that are already in this phase when they know what their main impact, socioeconomic impacts are, and actually know a lot about the impact pathways. Then the next step is setting up really appropriate monitoring data collection systems to really gather data that's relevant for this exercise. And I think those research infrastructures struggle a lot to understand how can I get the best knowledge together in order to pursue my cause. And the question would be, how can we best promote this cross-learning, experience sharing among people involved in impact assessment of research infrastructures, so that we don't reinvent the wheel, but we really help each other finding the best solutions. So this would be maybe the broad questions, but I'm happy to take your experiences first of all, because I'm aware that there might be very different level of experiences in the group we are having today.
Thank you very much, Elina. What I suggest is like we copy paste your questions into the chat, so then you can stop sharing, and we go ahead with comments, answers to questions, or anything people might have. If someone wants to take over, please.
Hello.
Hi, Alan.
Hi.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Elina, for the presentation. It's really, it's great to see how far you guys have come with RI Pathways. I mean, I see over, the last 18 months or so, maybe 2 years, just the evolution of the thinking, the structure, and the kind of nomenclature, the way you start to talk about this is, I think, really important. Before we can really come to kind of a way to address these issues, it's important to have a common language and a common understanding. Something as basic as, what do we mean by impact? And I think we have struggled with that over time, but it's good that at least we pushed things forward. I think, you're going back to your kind of question, how do we continue with this? I mean, I don't think it's a kind of a one-off thing. It becomes, it evolves into a discipline in a way. It evolves into a way that the management and, importantly, the governance starts to address the issue. And it's not a one-off kind of conversation, but it's just a normal part of the dialogue that, we're always having. Probably one thing that we should, if you had, imagine that you had a big conference full of different research infrastructures that came together to talk about impact, and that would be something that, they come from everywhere and they all get together and everybody presents their own case studies and you talk about this. I mean, you could imagine breakout sessions where different kinds of RIs that are similar to each other get together, because, it really, if I'm a lab, an electron microscope lab at a university, that's different than being CERN, and it's kind of annoying to sit and listen to the CERN guys talking all the time about their global impact, and we're just trying to get the community to understand, that we had a high school come in and that's important because we got 4 kids to get interested in chemistry because of that, and I think that kind of leveling the impacts and how we measure them, so that it's not that we're all somehow, playing in the same league all the time, would make it easier for people. And I think, the same is true when we're talking about, you can still have the same type of indicator, but it's just scaled to what kind of a structure we are, I mean, and that's where each individual, if the problem with making it too individual, if we're not able to benchmark at all, then, if we can't compare at all with each other, then that's not really useful either, because then everybody just kind of makes up their own thing. But going back to my first comment, I think the really important work that you guys have done in terms of helping us to get a better, more clarity around, the language of this and having a common language That kind of work we need to continue to do. And I think at some point it can't totally evolve forever. I think we've got to kind of agree on a certain terms and concepts that we can just kind of work then on. So, you know, that's very viable. And for me, at least, it's really nice to see the progress you guys have made. We'll use that. I'll ask you to speak at another thing. Okay. So I'll give that.
Thanks, Alan.
Yes, please. So I did add in the chat a link to the website of ESA where you can find the brochure which they recently edited on the matters of impact, on socioeconomic impacts. I rejoined the presenter today that says that impact is broader than cost benefits, but both are useful. And we see now that there is a shift and that our politicians are asking also for impact, not only for numbers, cost benefits. And as an ILO, of course, I'm used to work with numbers. Being a representative at Council, ESO Council, I see that we are also asked not only about numbers, but also about broader impacts. So thank you.
Thanks. Is there more? Corinne, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, it was to comment on the definition of impact. This is a piece of work we did with Elina during the RePath project to define our impact areas in Elixir. And at the beginning, I had all these grand ideas that we were going to solve hunger in the world and health, you know. But then we had to really scale back and be closer to home. You know, what do we do exactly, and what effect does it have? So it was things like research efficiency, making things faster, easier for the users of our services. It was about relationship capital, because we are, you know, a research infrastructure of people beyond being, you know, about data. It was about human capital, developing people, their skills, providing training. And of course, these can lead to down the line socioeconomic impact if you follow very, you know, long pathways of impact. But so it depends who we're speaking to. So I can justify that our impact against sustainable development goals, and these tend to be narratives, but I can also justify our impact to our funders with very clear examples. And for some of them, you can even go down to being quantitative with, you know, return on investment, for example. But sometimes qualitative data is fine. And this was a great discovery for me. You know, I was very worried as a scientist. I needed data, but actually it doesn't have to be quantitative. It can be qualitative. It can be perception surveys, you know. So I felt liberated that I could actually achieve a lot with what I already had. I didn't have to become, you know, an economist. I hope that helps.
Can I say one more thing, Charlotte, about this idea?
Yes.
About the impact and versus let's say return on investment or quantification. I mean, you know, we actually do think about these things in scientific terms all the time. I mean, you can measure the number of publications that come out of a facility, and as scientists will always tell you, that's a big difference versus the publication that wins the Nobel Prize versus the other 1,000 that didn't barely show up in some journal that you've never heard of. And we call that, you know, research impact. And we have indexes for measuring that. And I think what we're talking about here is a kind of a same concept in a different area. You know, I like the tree metaphor very much, but I was thinking, Alina, when you were talking, I mean, you can measure and count the number of leaves on the tree, but maybe the impact is, you know, did the acorns fall and grow other trees, or is there, you know, a shaded area under the tree where other plants could grow? I mean, the metaphor could be, you know, drawn out more. And this really is the idea that the impact is really what goes, you know, once you have done the quantification, then I think you ask yourself, so what? You know, so we measured that, that's interesting. And so what? You know, and I think this impact idea, it again, it is something that has, but we absolutely have to get beyond quantifying, because really, honestly, from an economic perspective, it's not always going to be very easy for our eyes to make a strong argument, because we don't operate in the same sphere as a company. And so trying to create a cost benefit, you know, a kind of an economic model that justifies the investment, probably in the long term it works out, but the time frames that we talk about, the investments return themselves over long periods of time, we just, for stakeholders, it loses relevance. And so I think trying to make that kind of economic comparison just doesn't really, it doesn't work out in the right time frame for a lot of our stakeholders.
What we would like to test also is to take you to our LinkedIn group. So those who are not in the group, we will try to invite everyone because it's a private group. So hopefully we won't be hacked there.
Yeah.
And we invite you strongly to continue the conversation there. I mean, raise questions, share best practices. Maybe Iso, you can put the link to the brochure as well. And we will also share the presentation on our website and on the LinkedIn group. And so I strongly invite you to take over this this group to continue discussing. And so thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Elina, for your time.